So here we are, 2 weeks from the end of Intercept Games, and there has still been no word from Take-Two, Private Division, or anyone at Intercept Games for that matter, on what the fate of Kerbal Space Program 2 will be. Not officially anyway. If you're not caught up on what's been going on with Kerbal Space Program 2, let me catch you up to speed. About 6 weeks ago, I posted a video complaining about the lack of communication we've received from the developers at Intercept Games, as well as the absolutely glacial speed of development that gave us only a single major roadmap update in nearly a year and a half. And that update was honestly pretty wimpy. It was a tech tree, along with a science mode which allowed you to progress through that tech tree by completing missions in the game. The majority of the items you unlocked through the tech tree were also already in the game prior to this update. And this took them nearly a year to release. About a week later, and several comments telling me to stop crying and let them cook, the company that owns Intercept Games, Take-Two, announced layoffs. And while they didn't officially announce Intercept Games as one of the studios being shuttered, a warrant was issued that detailed a studio in Seattle owned by Take-Two as closing, with roughly 70 employees being laid off. Well, this is both the location and size of Intercept Games. To add to this, some members of the Kerbal Space Program development team took to Twitter saying that they had been laid off and were looking for new opportunities. And that's pretty much it. If you're interested in knowing a little bit more, I will link the other videos in the top right as well as in the description below. But if you want to stay up to date on gaming news and developments as they come out, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I keep my videos as short as possible and straight to the point so that you can get the information you need and then get back in the game. Since then, some more of the developers have taken to Twitter to confirm that in fact the layoffs are coming at the end of June, but we've still only heard rumors about what is happening with Take-Two and their label of indie development known as Private Division. By some accounts, Take-Two is just trying to close down Private Division entirely. And this might be true considering the overwhelming majority of employees under Private Division have been laid off since February, all except a few from some of those studios that have games in early access or are nearing completion, like Moon Studios. But even Moon Studios has had a rough year so far, with the scathing reports about poor working conditions and some describing the studio as an actual nightmare to work for. But by other accounts, Take-Two is shopping for a buyer for Private Division and also the Kerbal Space Program IP. And they don't really seem to care if Intercept Games comes with that or not. They even had a buyer lined up at one point. Again, this is just a rumor, but apparently Paradox Games was interested before the deal fell apart. A deal also seems to have been in the works between Take-Two and a private equity group, which, as we all know, wouldn't mean anything good for the beleaguered IP. But I'll circle back to that in a little bit. More recently, the CEO of Take-Two claimed that they had not shuttered Intercept Games, but that seems to only have been true in the very literal sense that Take-Two still technically existed at the moment when the CEO made that claim. Kind of like after the news of the layoffs broke when the company released a statement saying that they are continuing to work on and update Kerbal Space Program 2. It wasn't a lie, they were and are still doing so, they just have immediate plans to stop very, very soon. So what have the developers been up to since we learned about these layoffs back in April? From the looks of the most recent patch notes posted on June 11th, it looks like they're squashing what bugs they can and maybe preparing for the release of another and potentially final update to the game. And once again, the fact that we haven't heard anything specifically from them about anything at all, not even a statement saying we don't know what's going on, we'll let you know when we do, is absolute bullshit. There was a Twitter post that said talk more when we can, but that was a month ago. I understand that they may not know what's going to happen with the game, and I also understand that they may very well be under some form of NDA about the status of the studio and everything else under Take-Two's umbrella. But we deserve better than this. People have spent money on this title with the promise that it was going to be developed and delivered, and now, nearly 2 years later, we have only received one single update that again was basically just a tech tree with a few bug fixes. And that's it. But even before we learned of these layoffs, I was complaining about the lack of communication from Intercept Games, so I feel like at least some of the burden of blame rests on Intercept Games and its managers. It does seem to me like the most likely scenario here, and I'm now just speculating, is that Kerbal Space Program will be absorbed into Private Division and sold off. To some, that may sound like a good thing. I do try to be an optimist. But the fact that Private Division has been reduced to a skeleton crew with only a few titles on life support, with Take-Two supposedly in talks with a private equity firm, I think it's possible they could be bundling IPs under Private Division and selling that off. And based on what usually happens when companies are purchased by private equity firms, this is a really bad sign for Kerbal Space Program. Typically, when private equity companies get involved, they have a habit of stripping everything and anything of value away from what they've purchased in order to sell it off for parts. Most recently, Red Lobster has made headlines for rapidly closing down a significant number of stores. John Oliver on Last Week Tonight even recently did a piece on this. I'd highly recommend you watch it if this is at all interesting to you. But to summarize what happened, a private equity firm bought Red Lobster, then sold off the land that many of the restaurants were sitting on. They then leased that land back to Red Lobster at inflated prices. This drastically increased the bottom line of operations of those stores and forced a lot of them to close. The private equity firms don't really care because they've typically already made back the amount of money they spent on the acquisition in the first place. So what's going to happen if a private equity firm buys Private Division? I really doubt it means that they're going to spend millions of dollars after the acquisition to rehire and staff the studios that were closed. It seems much more likely that they will probably strip them for parts, selling off individual IPs that were bundled under Private Division's label, or even worse, maybe they'll try to lease out the IPs to studios. Either way, it doesn't sound good. Best case scenario at this point sounds like somebody else buying Kerbal Space Program's IP, but who would be able to afford that aside from the already well-established studios? It kind of feels like we're trading the devil we know for the one that we don't. And like I said in my last video, this just sucks. Don't forget to hit that like button, it really helps my channel, and if you want to stay up to date on gaming news and developments, make sure you subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.